young.
I am.
And I am a young
Black.
A young black.
Young.
Black.
A young black.
Black equestrian.
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 Black equestrian.
Equestrian.
Black equestrian.
equestrian.
Black equestrian.
I'm a young black equestrian.
I am a young black equestrian.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Young Black Equestrians, the podcast. Did you know that, according to the NIH, 44% of riders experience concussions in their career, and 40% of those riders don't even seek medical care? Well, today we are going to be speaking with Tiffany Frierson. She's a mom, a teacher, and a working student whose passion for horses fuel so much of her life. She speaks with us today about life as an amateur adult rider and falling off of her horse and getting a concussion and what that entire experience was like. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed it. Before we get this episode started, here is a word from our sponsors. Clinics for a Cause, an initiative sponsored by Online Riders Collective, connects amateur riders with top trainers in a program that benefits the Equestrian Aid Foundation.
For only $25, riders submit videos up to 15 minutes long and get audio feedback from top clinicians recorded over their video clip. Outstanding trainers from all disciplines have volunteered to participate. Please visit the website for a clinician list and submission instructions, www.onlineriderscollective.com. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Young Black Equestrians, the podcast.
Tonight we are speaking with Tiffany Frierson, and she is going to talk with us about her equestrian journey, and we're going to dabble a little bit on concussions.
Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So if you want to briefly just tell us about yourself, where you're from, what discipline you ride, all that.
Okay. Well, I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and practically all of my riding has been hunters and a little bit of jumpers. Right now, I'm so happy because 7 months ago, I bought my thoroughbred cross Ollie.
Oh.
Yeah, and but I guess what brought me here today was that I fell off of him a year and a half ago and got a pretty significant concussion, even though at the time I didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a story.
Yeah, we're gonna hear all about that in a little bit. So how did you even get into horses?
And I guess I kind of feel like a late bloomer a little bit. I mean, when I was a little girl, I loved horses. And but I thought the only way you could have a horse was to have land, and we didn't have land. And so and I had one friend that did have land, and she had ponies, and I did a couple of trail rides with her. But I graduated from college and started teaching, and I really needed to do something for self-care because teaching is hard. And I heard about some celebrity doing learning how to ride a horse, like on TV. And I was like, I've always wanted to learn to do that. I'm gonna learn how to ride a horse. So at 25, I had my first riding lesson on a little gray mare named Tiny Bubbles. And I was hooked ever since then. And so I tried to get as much experience as I could. And even as an adult, I decided to become a working student. And I tried to ride at different barns. I took some equine management classes, like audited them at the community college, just because I wanted to learn as much as I could.
You went
And,
all in auditing classes. That's amazing. Yeah.
And I then taught beginning riding lessons, and did that for a little while until I started graduate school. And after graduate school, I met my husband, we got married. And so I took a little bit of a break to get married and have my son, and kind of picked up riding lessons when I could. I did own a horse while I was teaching riding lessons, but we weren't compatible. And so I ended up selling him and just leasing different horses. And about 3 years ago, I decided to kind of get back into it full time. and I've been riding for about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So now I fell in love with this horse that I'm leasing now. And even though I fell off of him, when the owner gave me the right price, I bought him.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. I applaud you for kind of taking that leap, even though you took a fall, you know.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that we want to chat about. So how describe your experience, you know, being, like you said, a late bloomer. Like what was the atmosphere like when you were entering the industry at that age?
Well, you know, I think I was really lucky because as a minority and as an adult, I ended up kind of going to barns and kind of bonding with the instructors.
Mm-hmm.
And the second barn that I went to where I taught riding lessons, all the instructors were my age. And then they had a good number of adults. So it really kind of ended up feeling like a second home.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really didn't have too many problems. I mean, mostly I got questions from other people like, you ride horses?
Mm-hmm.
And I got the question because I was an adult and I was Black. So I had a lot of people who kind of questioned that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I was really fortunate to have positive experiences with riding.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that's not the case for everybody.
Yeah,
Right.
not everybody.
Yeah.
Some people who interviewed have different experiences.
Yeah.
For sure. But I think that's an interesting perspective, like coming into a barn where you can be more like the instructors. Like I feel like if you, like when kids are going into barns and they're trying to, you know, befriend the boarders and stuff like that, like all these kids,
Mm-hmm.
like it's like high school drama kind of stuff.
Right.
Whereas if you kind of skip all them and then just, you know, befriend the instructors because you guys are kind of in the same point in life.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way to, or an interesting perspective to put on it, because you kind of go right to the source of the knowledge instead of having to rely on the border people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting to me. I don't think I've ever heard anyone, you know, make that distinction for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a wise choice.
Yeah, because it can.
Well, I was also a teacher at the time, so I kind of gravitated to helping the other kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that helped a lot too, because, you know, once they realized that I could help them, you know, kids would come to me for help as well. So it really did feel like a comfortable place for me at the barn that I spent the most of my time at.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the major challenges that you've had in your riding journey? Besides the fall, you know, just, you know, whether it's finding a place to board, you know, finding the right horse, deciding on discipline.
I think really, well, I'll be honest. The most challenging part has been the financial, and my husband doesn't really get my love for horses.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't quite understand that. And when I was considering buying Ollie, I wasn't sure at that time. I wasn't riding, and I wasn't sure if I was ever going to ride again. And he said, "You're going to buy a horse just so you can pet it?" And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much."
For now.
Yep, that makes me happy. So that's what I'm going to do. Price was right. So, but yeah, financially it's kind of been the big thing, because there have been times when I've leased horses and I've stopped the lease because I got to buy new kitchen floors. You know, I got to do something for the house, and then trying to kind of balance that with cost of daycare. So financially, that's been a big issue. I did own a thoroughbred, off the track thoroughbred, when I was an instructor, the one that I wasn't quite compatible with. And the nice part about that was that I worked for his board. So I really didn't have to pay a lot of money then. But as I got older, you know, and had a family, I didn't really have time to work.
Right.
So that's been the biggest biggest challenge. But I mean, some places here in Richmond, they have a really fancy barn. It's an equestrian rider, a hunter jumper, well, a jumper, Sulu Rose or Sulu Reed, I think is her married name. The price of board there is the cost of my mortgage. So it's been challenging trying to find places that I can afford. But now my horse is boarded in a and Caitlin, you'll like this. My horse is boarded in a county called Goochland County, about 40 minutes from my home, and
Wow.
and it's much more reasonable. And so I don't have any problems there. I really like it at that facility. And actually the owner of that facility is became one of the instructors at the barn that I rode before, and we connected on Facebook. And she told me about Ollie, and that Ollie's owner needed someone to lease him. So
Wow, things kind of just lined up for you. Like it's all kind of connections.
They did.
Yeah.
It's really been a blessing. I really do feel like the whole equestrian experience has been a blessing for me, because I get on and it's just me and my horse. I don't think about anything else, just me and my horse. So.
And I know a lot of times, I think the problems arise when we can't separate ourselves during a ride, when they say leave everything at the door, leave it in the car, and then when you get to the barn, it needs to, because horses can sense that energy.
Right.
So I think a lot of times when we, carry that baggage, stresses from the day, just anything, any like extra emotion, the horse is like, what's going on today?
Yes.
No, we ain't doing that. And then you get upset because, things aren't working out right. So there have been several times I've had to like, well, you know what? It's probably not a good idea to ride. I can't unload and you're looking at me like, girl, you're going to be snatching all on my mouth because you're mad. Don't get on me. So yeah, I completely agree with you there. That's the place for that separation to happen.
I've only had kind of one negative experience, but it really wasn't a negative experience. I tried to find a place closer to the house I live in now, and the owner of the barn was a conservative Christian. And, her being a Christian wasn't really the problem. And she was kind of nice to me. She wasn't rude. She was very professional. And everybody at the barn was really nice. And there was only one other adult in this barn, so she was real excited that I was there. But when I had to stop riding because another issue I have are my knees. I have really bad knees. And so this is kind of the one way that I can exercise without too much pain. But if my stirrups are too short, I'll have problems. And they were really big on equitation and, proper form. And so, they asked me to ride with my stirrups shorter than I wanted and ended up hurting my knee, and I had to take a break. But when I tried to call her back, I explained who I was. She never returned my phone call. And you just, sometimes you just kind of get a vibe from somebody, even though they're not rude or disrespectful to you.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of been, the only issue. And I'm actually surprised because, Richmond, Virginia was the capital of the Confederacy. And so, there are a lot of people in this area, that still have a lot of that Confederate pride. And, I've driven by that barn. They've got Trump sign out front, So
sounds about right.
Yeah. And so, and most of the barns that I've been to, there's been at least one other Black person, and this was the only barn that I've been to where there wasn't anybody, and so just me. And so I never went back there.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah. It's a fun place to go back to.
No. So let's talk about your fall and kind of the situation around that. What led up to that?
Well, honestly, I don't know what happened. um, I was riding, and most of the time it's a private farm, and so there's a house on the property, but it was a Sunday morning and everybody was at church. So it was just me and Ollie. And I remember cantering around the ring. And he's known to spook quite often. But I'd never fallen off of him before. And that was actually my best record on any horse that I had ridden on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I just remember cantering around the ring. And then the next thing I remember was getting up off the ground. Sitting up, I looked around for him and I saw that he was the top of the hill, standing outside of the gate, right next to his friend inside the gate, looking at me, ears perked, like, is she okay? and I remember saying to myself, I've got to lay back down. And I got up. I don't know how long I was unconscious. And I remember trying to go to catch him and kind of feeling a little bit out of it. And he trotted away from me. And I remember thinking, grain, go get grain. But I don't remember going to get grain. I don't remember catching him. I do remember getting back on though. Because
Wow.
you fall, you got to get back on. I didn't want him to learn bad behavior because my previous horse, that's what happened. He kind of learned he could get away with bad behavior. And then he kind of became kind of uncontrollable and bad behavior with me. And so I was kind of adamant that I didn't want that to happen with this horse.
Right.
And so I got back on, I cantered around one more time. I knew that and my tailbone hurt, my butt hurt real bad. And I just thought, I just thought something was wrong with my backside. I didn't have a headache. And by the time I got back to the barn, I felt okay. I knew I was going to be sore, but I felt okay. And you got a life. So I went home, I went to the grocery store, and in the grocery store, I was like, something's not right. My backside's hurting a little too much. And so I went to Better Med, it's a like a clinic, like a urgent care. And so I went there and he asked me all the neurological questions and I answered them fine. Found out I had a fractured tailbone. And I was like, okay, well, I just can't ride for 8 weeks. But what happened was maybe 10 days later, I started getting dizzy spells in the evening, just around dinner time. And I wasn't sure what was happening because it happened like once and then a few days later it happened again. Then it started happening more frequently and I started to feel kind of out of it. And I was thinking that maybe I had some other health problem like high blood pressure or blood sugar problem. Because again, my head didn't hurt at all. And I knew nothing about concussions. I thought if you had a concussion, your head was going to hurt right away.
Yeah.
And even though I told I think it was a physician's assistant at Better Med that I can't remember what happened. He just kind of said, well, look out for these things. But because my head didn't hurt, I didn't really pay attention. And there was a colleague who said about 3 weeks after all this happened, and I was telling him my symptoms, he was like, I think you have a concussion. And I was able to go to my primary care physician, and I was there like 10 minutes and told her all my symptoms. And she said, you have post-concussion syndrome. I was like, what's that?
Yeah.
And she said, well, some people don't have concussion symptoms right away. And so if you don't have concussion symptoms right away, there's a good chance it could be post-concussion syndrome. A concussion usually is healed within a few days to 3 months. And if you have symptoms past 3 months, then you have post-concussion syndrome. I finally got to the neurologist maybe like 6 weeks after my fall. And she confirmed, that I had post-concussion syndrome. And she couldn't give me like a time frame. But she said my concussion was pretty significant since I lost consciousness. But my primary care physician was wonderful because 2 days after I saw her, I was in concussion therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I didn't know that was a thing. But
Yeah. What does that consist of?
oh, well, it's a lot that goes into it. And actually, it's tailored towards your symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So every day, my therapist would ask me like what my symptoms were. And the spinning was vertigo. And so they kind of did this weird thing where they kind of laid me down backwards and tilted my head a funny way to help with that. I did a lot of eye movement exercises, kind of looking at like dots in kind of different configurations, sometimes on a computer screen, sometimes on pieces of paper, because my eyes weren't working together. It was, and I had a delay. So I turned my head and there would be a delay. So a lot of it was kind of things like that, a little bit of balance exercises. So, but every week I would come in and, well, every day that I came in, she would ask me something different. And I did that for about 7 months.
Wow.
Concussion therapy. I also had to do speech therapy. And the one thing about concussions that's kind of weird is that nobody's symptoms are the same. And the doctor thinks that I didn't experience my head symptoms because my body was trying to heal my tailbone. I was like dizzy for like 6 months, pretty much. Once the dizziness started, I was on medicine for migraines because that started right when I saw the neurologist. But after 6 months, the migraine medicine was no longer effective.
Right.
And I started having really bad side effects. From that, night terrors was like the worst. And so they put me on another medicine, and those side effects were even worse. Those were awful. I had a hard time talking, which that was a symptom that started after I stopped taking the medicine. Like some of the second medicine that I was on, I had a hard time processing words. I had a hard time writing. And so I just was like, I'm not going to take any more migraine medicine. But then I started having some issues with speech. I couldn't think of words. And it was so funny because one day I was at work and I yelled out, "I'm pregnant." And I wasn't. I was looking for another P word. But things like that happen, is that, there might be a similarity in the word you're looking for, like the initial sound, but I would say like the wrong word, like every day, at least once a day, the wrong word would come out of my mouth. And sometimes I would be totally unaware of it. So I would be, especially with my son, I'd talk to my son and tell him to do something, and he would look at me like I had two heads because I said the wrong word and didn't realize it.
Yeah.
So concussions it's very interesting. I joined a post-concussion syndrome Facebook group, and there's so many people that have similar stories. Couple of them have been falls from horses.
Yeah.
And so everybody kind of has stories about, putting their keys in the refrigerator, or not remembering why they went to a room, or going to the grocery store and then having no idea why they're there.
Golly, I feel like I gotta remember if I fell off a horse.
Well, and the thing about it is, I may have had a concussion before, because this definitely was not my first fall, but didn't really realize it. If you fall and hit your head and see stars, but then you fine an hour later, that's the concussion.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so a lot of people don't really realize that.
So I meant to ask you before, but can you explain what a concussion actually is? Because I don't think all of our listeners will know exactly what that is.
So it's a brain injury, and you don't have to really hit your head in order to get a concussion. It's just your brain has to bounce against the side of your skull. So, and everybody's different. So some people, will fall several times and hit their head, and it's not really a big deal. They never get a concussion. But I think over time, for me, with all the falls that I've had off of horses, I think I may have had kind of mild brain injuries and not known it. And this one
Added up.
yeah, just really, I mean, and also for post-concussion syndromes, they say more women get it, and the older that you are, the more likely you are to get it.
Oh, wow.
So I'm 45, and so, you know, that I think played a factor into it.
I'm kind of just thinking of all the times I might have fallen off or seen other people fall off, and we just get up and get back on.
Exactly. And I was wearing a helmet. So a lot of people say, well, weren't you wearing a helmet? And I said, yes, I was.
Yeah.
I was.
That was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. On him, I always wear a helmet because he is spooky. You know, you'll never know when he spooks at something. You know, sometimes you can predict it and sometimes you can't. He's never bolted or done it. He just kind of jumps sideways. But if you don't know that you got to keep your heels down, hips relaxed, you can pop right off. And he's 16'3", so I'm up there a ways.
Yeah. It's a big fall.
We need all the safety protection.
Yeah.
That's a big fall for sure. How did your family kind of cope with your, diagnosis and helping you work through that?
So my parents are absolutely wonderful. I'm pretty independent, so my husband was accommodating, and I didn't really ask for a lot of help, and his job kind of keeps him pretty busy. So my parents are retired, and so if I only had a few days where I couldn't drive. The doctor said, you seem okay to drive. And I would drive places, and what would happen is I would drive and I would be fine. And then when I would get to my destination and step out the car, I would be really, really dizzy. So there were only 1 or 2 days where I felt like I couldn't drive. And so my parents drove me. They even drove me to the barn just to go see Ollie. And a lot of it is being patient, because one of the things that happens to a lot of people that get concussion syndrome is their emotions kind of get out of control. You know, we overreact to things. And so my husband was really patient with me in that regards, and my son were really patient with me. I'd have to go to bed kind of earlier than they did on many nights. And so, I mean, they were great, but I've heard a lot of stories about couples breaking up because their significant other couldn't handle their emotions, couldn't handle the fact that they couldn't work. I was lucky because if I had a rough day, I could work from home. So I normally work from home 2 days a week anyway. So my boss was like, if you need to work from home, that's great. And so I'm kind of lucky and fortunate. My mom went grocery shopping for me a couple of times. So because with the concussion, stimulation is out of control. So going to the grocery store, there's a lot to see. Your eyes are constantly moving. There's so much to kind of remember. And a lot of people feel very sick in the grocery store. So if I was still teaching, I would have had to take time off. There would have been no way that I would have been able to teach a class with my symptoms that I was having. Some people are really sensitive to noise and light. I was not so sensitive to light, but I was sensitive to noise. And now I work in an office environment, and so it's pretty quiet. It's not too loud. So
yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you had the support that you needed, because a lot of times, the hardest thing is not only going through the symptoms of it, but kind of the aftermath.
Well, one thing that was hard was that at first the doctors told me you can't ride again. You won't be able to ride anymore. If you hit your head again, the concussion will be worse. Your symptoms will be worse. And so I kind of had resigned myself that I wasn't going to ride anymore. But around about a year, I started feeling a lot better. And both of my doctors, my primary care physician and my neurologist, was like, have you gotten back on yet? And I was like, wait, you told me I couldn't. And I told my family that I wasn't going to ride again because that's what you told me.
Oh.
So when I decided that I'm going to try it again, you know, my parents were a bit upset,
Yeah.
but they didn't protest.
Then
My
you bought a
husband-
whole horse.
Yeah, I know. And I had to break it to them gently. But you know, they're still supportive. Like they kind of, you know, watch my son when my husband's not available. You know, they listen to my horse stories. You know, when I come home and talk about, you know, Ollie being a good boy that day, not spooking anything.
Yeah.
You know, they don't give me a hard time. So
Was the post that you made in the Black Female Equestrians Facebook group, was that your first time getting back on him?
it was.
Wow.
It was. And he's a horse that really should be ridden regularly. And his owner hadn't ridden him. It had been 6 months since I bought him. And so he wasn't really ridden regularly once I stopped riding because of the owner's schedule. But the owner of the barn got on him for me for the first time. And I've been lunging him. So I've been trying to, throughout this whole time, keep my bond up with him.
Yeah.
We did a lot of lunge work and some ground work. And one of the things I really wanted to do was to shore up the voice commands so that I know my leg was going to be really weak. And so I didn't, you know, I wanted to really continue that bond so that when I got on him, it should be a little easier.
Right. And I'm sure, I mean, that much time of doing groundwork was so helpful anyway, you know, helping with the spooking, helping, you know, with your communication, you know, and what helps him know what to kind of expect from you, learn your mannerisms and stuff like that. I'm sure that time off was still better than not having anything.
Yeah. It also helped that he wasn't ridden regularly, so he's not fit. So it gives us opportunity to kind of get fit together. So, because that would have been different if he had been exercised 3 times a week and I hadn't done any of that. So we're kind of working together to get back slowly.
I love the teamwork.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. So what are your goals with him, you know, for the next few years? What are you guys thinking you're trying to achieve?
You know, really, I just want to enjoy him. I mean, I just want to get on him and hack around. I don't think I'm going to do any more jumping because most of the time when I fall off, it's been at a fence. And so, and he's 16, about to turn 17 in April. And so he's had a stifle injury. He's had a few injuries. So, you know, I just want to kind of hack around on him. We ride around the farm, do a little trail riding around the farm. So I just want to enjoy him and I want our bond to grow. You know, I don't really have time to like show him. I don't have a trailer or a truck. I tried to convince my husband to buy a truck, but I wasn't successful with that. So, you know, because I would love to take him out on a trail ride somewhere. But for now, we just enjoy the farm and, you know, just working on, you know, working on his frame, making sure that, you know, keeps himself composed and carrying himself correctly, and fitness for me, because this is kind of the most consistent type of exercise that I was doing was riding. And so I just want to kind of keep that up.
Yeah, those are great goals, period. You know, there's no reason everybody has to be like in a show ring or, you know, you can still maintain a positive and active relationship with your horse if you're not competing or, you know, always going off to do something. So I admire that for you guys, with you guys. So what advice would you give aspiring equestrians today?
I think the biggest thing is, don't be intimidated by anyone because, um, there are a lot of people who don't quite get this whole equestrian horse thing, and it can be discouraging. You just kind of remember like why you got into it in the first place, and let that kind of be your motivation. And to form a bond with your horse, get to know your horse. That's the most important thing, I think I went to one barn one time where there were grooms, and the grooms got the horses ready for the riders or the owners, and there's really no bond. The horses are very well trained, so anybody can get on them and ride, but there's nothing like when your horse comes to you, you're staying in the field and he just comes to you because he knows you and loves you, or being able to tell that something's not right because you know your horse and how they move.
Right.
And just that bond is just essential.
Yeah.
I don't even know how people could skip up that time, that personal time, just in grooming. I mean, horses in the wild, they groom each other in the herd.
Right.
We've taken our horses out of herds. If they're not in a pasture, or whether they are or not, I mean, they might be with one other horse. Use that time.
Yeah.
Because they're seeking it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. For a whole year, that's all I did was spend time with him. I wasn't, year and a half, I wasn't riding. That was ultimately the reason why I decided to buy him, even though I didn't know I was going to ride ever again, was because I just formed a bond with him.
Yeah. I admire that for sure, because I just feel like a lot of people would have just quit.
Yeah. Yeah. My family was expecting me to quit completely. But I was like,
imagine hearing like, you can never ride again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will tell you that, along with my heightened emotions, I tell you, every time I went to a doctor, I cried. I literally cried. And I actually did some therapy because, I was having such a hard time with all of my emotions and processing what happened to me and trying to figure out, whether or not I was going to ride again. And, kind of through that, I mean, my goal was, because the owner, I knew at some point was going to sell him. And she was asking a little more than I wanted to pay initially. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to research some rescues. And I'm just going to find like a rescue that maybe an off the track thoroughbred that can't be ridden anymore. And I'm going to adopt him or her. And so that was kind of like my plan. And, then God turned around and said, nope, you're going to end up with him. So.
Well, it looks like either way, you were not letting horses escape your life.
No.
Yeah.
They bring me joy.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's nice to have that. Like, not everybody knows what brings that feeling for them,
Right.
And so they're like dabbling around and doing lots of random things. I was talking to an employee today, and she was like, yeah, my boyfriend broke up with me because he said I'm uninspired. And I was just like, well, I don't even know what that feels like. Like, I'm just so inspired, by the horses and by everything we're doing, but it revolves around horses. Like, dang, girl. So it's nice to create this community and to be involved with people that have that same drive, and there's no question.
Right.
And I feel like that happens with horse people all the time. Like you hardly ever see those like wish-washy. They're like, oh, I don't know if I like horses. Like sometimes I do. It's either you do or you don't.
Right. Well, the barn that I'm at now, everybody there is an adult. There's only like 7 horses there. And, we all kind of have that same passion for horses. And so everybody doesn't ride. And there's 1 or 2 horses that are retired there, but their owners still come and see them. And, we get to kind of talk. And look out for each other's horses. And if a big snowstorm's coming, hey, you need me to come out and help get the stalls ready, so it's a little community there, like a little family.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I know that you have kind of have experience at different places. What do you look for when you are choosing a barn? Have you had to board Ollie in different places?
No. So this was the only place. I mean, he was there. He had just been there maybe like 6 months before I started leasing him.
Okay.
And the last place that he was at, I do know that they didn't care for their horses properly. Like, not filling water troughs and, just not proper care. And so the one reason why I didn't move him to a place, because I live in a county that's kind of suburban, but also mostly rural. So I probably could have found some place closer to where I live, but I know the owner, I trust the owner, and because of our conversations, like, I know she'll throw on 2 blankets if it's really cold, or, she has a degree in equine management. And so she knows about, different feeds, and he's had ulcers before. He will lose weight he'll lose 50 pounds in one night if the temperature drops too quickly. He just got that metabolism. And so, she will adjust his feed so that makes sure that doesn't happen. So, I mean, I just kind of look for kind of cleanliness. I mean, I know it's a barn, but things should have a place.
Yeah.
I kind of look for how the owners talk about the horses. Like, is it a little more than just a job, that they do? I pay attention to the other boarders and try to like listen to some of the questions that they ask, like the conversations they'll have with the owner, if I can. Sometimes cost makes a difference and sometimes it doesn't. So that's not always, the case. The nice thing about this barn is that I can also text the owner at any time and, ask her a question, or if she goes out of town, she lets us know, and she lets us know who's going to be in charge of the horses.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, this place, and one of the primary things is, does it feel comfortable?
Right.
Because that's been the places that I've been at the longest, is where it just felt the most comfortable for me. Kind of something you can't really put in words too well, but yeah, that's what I look for.
It makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Especially being a minority, it's not always comfortable.
Yeah. I ended up moving to a place where I could have the horses on my property after college. And the barn that it was like a co-op barn. So we all had a schedule and fed and helped do stuff. But I cried like leaving. I was like, I know it makes no sense to pay to keep my horse here when there's a barn outside my house. But like, I didn't want to leave, have horses on your own property and you don't interact with other horse people. Like, you can ride, you can do all these things by yourself. So I definitely understand the whole, just being comfortable with where you at and, having some sort of community and resource at your barn. That's very important.
Yeah.
Very important. Caitlin, you got any more questions for her?
Yeah, Tiffany, what would you tell someone who has fallen off a horse and, I don't know, maybe they like get up and feel a little dizzy, or they might stumble a little bit? What advice would you give them for after their trail ride or their practice and training, show, whatever it is? What would you tell them?
Well, if I could really talk to them in person, they definitely need to go to the doctor, because I should have gone to the emergency room in an ambulance that day. I drove 40 minutes home by myself. Should not have done that. And then to tell them kind of what to look for in the future and let them know that they can have symptoms. I mean, some people have reported going a whole month without symptoms. And so, making sure that people are aware. That was one reason why I wanted to talk to you all today, because I thought us horse people fall off and hit our heads all the time, and then we get back on and
Yeah.
don't really think twice about it. You know, we're pretty tough. And so
And a lot of us don't wear
Yeah.
helmets.
yes.
Or go to the doctor.
Or go to the doctor, yeah, because of the style of riding, or we don't want to look like a lame, or whatever the reason. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go to the doctor and just educate them about the symptoms of a concussion, because they can be vision problems. Because a lot of people think they go to the eye doctor. They think something's wrong with my eyes now, and they don't put two and two together, or they don't go to the ear, throat, nose specialist because they don't know why they're dizzy.
Yeah.
They just don't put two and two together.
Yeah.
A lot of people have neck pain, and I didn't have neck pain starting until like maybe 7 months out. I started having neck pain, so I really feel like we do need to be educated about, concussions. A lot of people think concussions are dramatic, like you have to have been like in a car accident, or they think of football players, who hit their head over and over again, and then they have really aggressive behavior. And a lot of the women that I know that have had concussions, it's emotions. They're crying for things that they would not normally cry about, or they have a lot of heightened anxiety. Sometimes kids will be diagnosed with like ADD because they just can't focus in school. And they don't realize it's related to the fact that they hit their head. My son plays soccer, and he was on the team with the little boy that I saw him in therapy one day, concussion therapy, and his mom said that this was a spring. He hit his head in the fall, and they did not realize that he had a concussion, and he was trying to play soccer. I remember thinking, that boy looks out of it. Why is he in the game? He looks kind of out of it. Turns out he had a concussion.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, that was like 7 months later before they figured it out, because kids can't always articulate how they're feeling. Yeah.
And it's scary to them. They don't want something to be wrong, especially with them not being able to communicate what the feeling is.
Right.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people, they don't want to have to stop doing what they love, and so they don't say anything. A lot of athletes do that. So,
that's what I was thinking. When people get in a car accident, they'll go. They come march right on down.
Right.
Go to the chiropractor afterwards. Everything.
Insurance to click in, and they'll go after a car accident.
Yeah, but when it comes to something that you love doing, I guess that fear of being told that you either can't do it anymore, or you're gonna have to stop doing it if you want to heal. And you just have to get over that.
Yeah. I remember my therapist saying, you can't get on for now. And she never said that I couldn't ride again. She just said there's a certain period of time where you really should not ride. And she said, and you horse people are the worst. Y'all just want to get back on.
Yeah. I know earlier when you said, what are you going to say if somebody says that you can't ride? My first thought was, well, I'll ride at some point. I mean, maybe not this week, but.
And that's what I thought, when I went to the neurologist the first time and she told me, I was like, well, I don't know. I don't believe her. I'm gonna wait and see how it goes. And then 3 months went by and 6 months went by, and I was actually felt worse at 6 months than I did at 1 month. And so that's when it kind of dawned on me that I really might not be able to ride again.
Right.
But I'm back in the saddle.
Oh, I really can't even get past the whole like Ollie is still being in the picture,
Oh yeah.
I guess maybe
sold that.
Huh?
Somebody probably would have sold, like,
right.
We're not doing this again.
Right. And it's just, maybe it's not knowing what happened that kind of kept you guys together? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud because I feel like if somebody knew, like, oh, it was just a leaf and he threw me off and I slammed my head, if they had the whole production with it and I was knocked out for 2 hours and nobody was there, I feel like that adds more fear into it,
right?
Than not knowing.
I realized it maybe about a month or two afterwards. I was like, I'm glad I don't know. Because at first I was like, well, if I know, then I can fix it. Like I can figure it out. But then I was like, maybe there's a reason and I don't know what happened. And I mean, again, even though he spooks often, it's never anything major, I mean, at least when I'm on him, it doesn't feel major. Now, maybe somebody watching might think that it was a big movement, but because he's such a big boy, it doesn't really feel like a really big thing. He's never reared when I've been on him. He's never bucked when I've been on him. He's never bolted. So, it just, who knows what happened. I mean, it was hot that day. I could have passed out from dehydration. I don't know. So I like not knowing. It's kind of helped my confidence. I'm not really thinking. I'm not over analyzing.
Right. That's fantastic. Fantastic for sure. Yeah. All right.
I'm glad there was a happy ending. That makes my heart smile.
I know. I didn't, when Caitlin was like, yeah, this lady, she had a concussion. She wants to talk to us. And I was like, I don't want her to tell people, like, I got a concussion, don't ride, y'all. Don't ride. But then I realized that you were the lady that posted in the Black female equestrians group. And I was, okay. She's
it's like a huge accomplishment because I know what the statistics are for kids. Kids fall off most of the time; they don't get back on. But I have no idea what it is for adults. Because a lot of my peers, we just get back on.
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of adults don't get back on if they have a pretty bad fall. I mean, most of the time, adults that we don't. I mean, I thought it was going to be 6 weeks. My tailbone was going to heal, and then it was 8 weeks, and I was like, man, I'm still a little sore. And then 10 weeks, but of course I was having concussion symptoms pretty badly back then too. So, but I mean, when I fell off and found out I had a fractured tailbone, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm getting back on. Just give me 8 weeks, I'll be back on. That was my attitude. But I had fallen off so many times before that I was like, I'm just gonna get back on. Which that's what we do.
That is right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It just makes my heart happy that you got, not that you went through all that, but that you came out on the other side and you're still obviously passionate about it, and you still have the relationship with Ollie. He's not shipped off somewhere. Like that just makes me happy. So
I'm hoping to be an inspiration and to other people and get the information about concussions, because we really don't talk about it enough.
Right.
Yes, we need the correct info.
Yes. And firsthand experience is always the best way to share that information. So I mean, even I guess prior to this episode, we'll look up some statistics just to share like numbers and, get like a list of symptoms, stuff like that you discussed, so that we can share it like actual graphics with our listeners, just to kind of have that concrete visual there to accompany this episode. So
great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight for Young Black Equestrians TV. We really appreciate your time, and we will let you know when this episode goes live.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, nice meeting you all.
Nice meeting you too.
Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Young Black Equestrians, the podcast. Head over to our Facebook page and let us know what you think about this episode. Did you learn something new that you didn't know before? Feel free to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more exclusive content. See you guys next week.